I have been measuring the bulkheads for the Pilar, the Escampavio Pilar, and checking the fit against the keel, and there's way more problems than I thought there was going to be. So the first thing is that the cutouts, the cutout widths on both of the keel and the bulkheads is not matched to fit the wood thickness, which means that this can move around forwards, backwards and sideways. So what that means is that a small shim piece of wood will need to be glued on both sides of here to make it fit snugly. Now one would need to be sure that that was cut dead center, and I'm not sure that it was. So, and the reason I say that is on some of the, let me just find one here. So on some of the bulkheads there's a little piece coming up there. It broke off on a number of those that I was busy with, but it doesn't match the cutout on the bottom. So I'm going to have to verify that the cutouts on the bulkheads are dead center in the middle of bottom. Otherwise, gluing that bulkhead in is going to ensure that you've got a totally messed up ship. Now the the fact that the cutouts are a bit oversized in the fore aft direction means that I need to put a shim on the bulkhead as well, but it's unclear whether that would be on the fore or aft side of the bulkhead, and the amount of play that we're talking about is up to 2 millimeters. Now that's not the biggest of problems, and one of the guidelines there is to, now I've measured, I've sort of positioned all of them on my deck, and it's okay that I draw this in pencil because this is going to get planked. So I position all of my bulkhead lines, and then for instance, taking number 9, which is over here, you can position number 9 and get an idea of the fit, how much oversized the bulkhead is. Now it shouldn't, I wasn't expecting it to be oversized. I've measured each of the bulkheads and I've made a measure against the side there to indicate to myself, and you'll notice that I've put a little plus indicator, and it looks like most of the bulkheads have ended up being about 1.5 to 2 millimeters wider than the deck. So now in the last video I mentioned that you certainly need to be careful that you are not doing this when you start planking. The bulkheads need to remain at the intended shape, and these are very thin, and it would be quite easy to lose a millimeter or two, or even worse, think that the width of the bulkhead should match exactly to what was given on here. But if all of them are a little bit oversized, with about the only one, I can't remember, there was maybe one that was sort of, oh yes, number 4. Number 4 at the second widest point was not oversized at all. But my point being that if you thought that you should squeeze the bulkheads, that's probably a wrong approach here. So, as you may have seen in the other video, I was saying that I would glue a piece of bracing across the top so that while I'm building, you at least got a rigid shape on your bulkhead. But before you do that, you've got to sort of really be sure of what, you know, what the arrangement is of all of this. So if I accept that I'm going to have a 1 to 2 millimeter, 1.5 to 2 millimeter overstep on each of the bulkheads as I'm building, what it means that as my hole takes shape and comes up to the deck line, I've now got this thin gap there. And then looking at the image, so there is this dark piece which, if you looking carefully at the pictures given and the plans, that's in line with the deck. So, sorry, it's in line with the deck planking at least. Now that's thin planking, that's very thin planking, so it's negligible. So this piece could be covering a bit of a gap there. So a sort of a first thought is that as you have sort of reached the deck line with all of your planking, and you get to this point, and you then fit your deck on, you'd have an almost even 1.5 to 2 millimeter gap along each side, which needs to be covered with a cover strip. Now this image, it's not going to be the easiest to see on this picture, but the plank line appears to go above the bulkhead cross line by the thickness of the deck, which would make sense. That means that by the time you've got your deck on, it fits perfectly evenly into your plank line. Now this deck isn't flat, it makes a bit of a bow, and that you can see over here. Just get rid of all of that. So you can see that it starts off at the bow, the deck line high, it runs lower, it runs down, and then there's a sort of a low point, and then it gradually rises up again. So when you're gluing onto your keel, you need to pre-plan that those cross sections at the top of the bulkheads are not haphazard, and in fact you don't even want like a millimeter off, you don't even want 0.5 millimeter off. They need to rise at exactly the correct angle, because whatever you're off at the top, you're going to have a bad shape on your hull. So when I mentioned that this really needs to get, it needs to have a rigidity on its shape, and that's very difficult by placing the deck on before your bulkheads are giving it any rigidity, and yet it's the deck that's providing the basis for the positioning for the bulkheads. And relying on those cutouts so that your bulkhead slots into them exactly to provide you with the perfect height would not be a correct approach. That you just need a couple of these cutouts to be not quite correct. Now I've drawn a line there to sort of get an idea of They don't all follow a horizontal line there, but some of them do. So that's that section that I've drawn there. Now, a little bit of an odd thing is that when I placed the wood piece over the drawing, it doesn't match. The drawing is about 1.5 centimeters shorter on side view. Yet putting the where did I put that? Putting the deck onto the top view on the plan seems to match closely, like within a couple of millimeters. So now I don't know if the drawing is to be relied upon at all. We may be sitting with a problem of they didn't create the wood pieces, or they didn't do the drawing perfectly according to what they intended. Now I need to be sure on what measures I can count on. Another odd thing was that in getting all of these bulkheads, in checking all of these bulkheads against the various deck the positions as marked on the deck, which I took from the stern, from the keel. What was I going to say? As I was taking the looking for the correct piece to do the measurement, these pieces aren't marked with their bulkhead number, and a couple of them are really close to the shape of others close by. So around amidships, where the shape of the or the deck width and the shape of the hull doesn't change very much, I can see that on this kit it would be somewhat easy to assume a wrong bulkhead into a particular position. Now I have no idea. If you've built this kit, please make comment, but it took me quite a while to verify the width by laying the bulkheads onto each other and checking the curvature flow, and also checking by putting the keel positions aligned as they should be, and looking at the deck level height adjustment. So there's 3 measures, 3 ways that you can find out that you've got the correct bulkheads in position there. So I've at least got it marked out on the deck. This, by the way, is also a bit warped. I don't mean overall, I mean the one side has got quite a curvature in it here, whereas the other side is flat. So obviously this thing needs to fit on eventually like that, but I'm going to have to wet this side and ensure that I've got a flat, because it's actually quite a strong ply. This side is very nice, but I'm going to have to get that flat. Another thing to watch out for, which I noticed, is that, and I don't know if that's accidental or that one's flat. I was wondering if the deck had angles on these for a runoff. Looks like not, maybe. So maybe I can actually just assume that the deck was a complete flat piece. Yes. I first thought that maybe, you know, it was a little bit there and a little bit there. No, okay, that's okay. So that means that I can look for some adequate wood to first cross brace those. Now you might be wondering, well, okay, if you cross brace those, then when you eventually get your deck on, you're going to have these extra bits of wood when you in fact needed access inside. But that's only a temporary thing. Once all your planking is done and you've got a completely rigid hole, you can then just take your little saw and cut those out again. It's almost just a building aid. And a couple of them don't need to be cut out. So underneath there, for instance, that's a great place to have a bit of extra rigidity. That doesn't need to be cut away. That doesn't need to be cut, although, well, that one, number 2, is very rigid anyway. That doesn't need a brace. Number 3 might need a brace. So yeah, so we've got 2 of them there and there, which we'll leave it, but we're going to need them present for all of the others in aiding the building. But even after I've done the shimming, putting a thin piece of wood either side here and on my bulkheads, so that eventually when I slot these in, they fit at least snugly into position there. We still need to ensure that, because it'll still be quite easy to have a couple of millimeters off that way, or even a little bit off center there. So there's going to be a lot of checking square, and even doing so, these are thin, so you could quite easily get all sorts of weird shape going on once you start your planking. But step number 1 is just to achieve the ability to glue these on correctly, and the deck is going to play a big role in that one. So we'll see how we go with that. This section of the keel does not get any bulkhead over it. So the tail, the rear end, the aft end of the ship angles upwards, and this is basically a flat section in the water. Now there's one area which is really weak. This this shaft, when placed in position, still has 2 millimeters out either side of it. And all they show on the plans is to glue these 2 pieces were to sort of clamp and glue the shaft in position to give it a better strength in there. Except that's absolutely not going to work, because the shaft isn't the same diameter. The shaft diameter, the outer diameter of that, I'm not sure what you call the outside of the shaft. It sort of means that I'm going to need to figure out what to put over here to bring that up to thickness without messing up the shape of this section of the ship. So there's quite a few things to organize before gluing can start on this. Not quite as good quality as I'd originally thought. It actually looks like a very fast production kit, but that's okay. One can still make a great model out of it. An interesting point is that the kit over here shows that all of those bulkheads have got a cross member right across on the top, exactly what I was saying. You can see it there as well. So they've all got those cross members, yet that isn't reflected on the parts. The parts don't have that, and there isn't anything indicating that in the plans or the or the steps. So and not only that, by the time they've got their photo of the completed hull, those cross pieces don't look like that. So you know, I sort of pity the beginner taking things literally on this build, because I can see it going really, really wrong if you don't follow certain guidelines. So that's probably the next steps. By the next video, I've hopefully got the cross members on each of the bulkheads, a shim on the keel. I've got to cut away that section of wood so that the shaft actually fits in there, as I'd mentioned. The keel is also, of course, not straight by any means. So, but that's, you don't need to worry about that at this stage. It will play a slight role when we are gluing in the bulkheads, in that you at least within the narrow band of where you are, it must be 90 to that section, because once you sort of flex it like that, you know, each section will be 90 to the part that it was glued into. And in any case, because these bulkheads are so flimsy, if you're off by a slight bit, you'll be able to adjust it by a slight bend on the bulkheads. Okay, I think that's it for this update. That was quite a bit of measuring and checking to see how we're going to progress. Okay, till the next video.